Frankenstein's monster is very similar to this character. Here's why. Both Frankenstein and the character used from Guilty Gear in this essay, Abba, have deep themes of isolation and nature versus nurture in their backstories, and they show how important it is to nurture children in early development. Before I can get into the meat of this video, I need to go over what isolation and the discussion of nature versus nurture is. Isolation is described as the process or fact of isolating or being isolated, and in isolation, without relation to other people or things, separately. Nature versus nurture is described as a long-standing debate in biology and society about the relative influence on human beings of their genetic inheritance or biology, and the environmental conditions of their development. Now that we know what we're discussing, we can get to the fun stuff. The first and second paragraphs will go over the individual characters and their backstories, while the third will go over their similarities and differences. Firstly, let's go over Frankenstein's monster. To make it easier for myself, I'll refer to him as just the monster. Frankenstein was published January 1st, 1818 by the iconic Mary Shelley. Frankenstein is credited as the first sci-fi story, starting an entire new genre. Given most of us have read Frankenstein by now, I'd hope, I can head straight to talking about the monster. In chapter 5, page 43, the monster finally comes to life, and Victor Frankenstein, his creator, describes it as such. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineates the wretch with whom such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form? His limbs are in proportion, and I selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful, great God! The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feelings of human nature. I'd worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I deprived myself of rest and health. I desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. Victor leaves his own creation, running away from what is essentially his own child. The monster has been abandoned, left to experience the world alone. He struggles by himself. For example, when he begins to learn what fire is, he accidentally burns himself, making him learn how fire works and how he can use it to cook. When he begins to search for more food to cook, he stumbles across a hut that had multiple humans inside of it. He then decides to stay in the nearby hovel for shelter, before realizing he can see and hear the humans inside the hut from it. He then grows dedicated to learning how humans live.
Are you alive? Huh? I'm gonna make him say, of course. Can you come to my house tonight? I'm gonna make him say, I'll be there. Okay?
He, due to good outside influences, was able to learn and grow, becoming more human than ever, just like he wanted. Now for the character that's more difficult to talk about, as most likely none of you know her. Guilty Gear is a series of 2D fighting games similar to Tekken, Street Fighter, and Mortal Kombat. The first game, developed by Daisuke Ishiwatari and published by Arc System Works, released in 1998 and has since had multiple sequels. The character, Abba, who I'll cover in this project, was released in their third game, Guilty Gear X2, and was then playable in the fourth game, Guilty Gear Isuka. She returned 18 years later in the most recent game, Guilty Gear Strive, as paid DLC. I'll warn everyone now, Guilty Gear lore is extremely weird, so don't expect this to be realistic at all. Abba, the lovingly latched-on homunculus, is an artificial life form, specifically a homunculus, obviously, created by an unnamed scientist in the Frasco Mountains. Before she was born, her creator got taken away by the military for unknown reasons. For the first 10 years of her life, she was isolated and alone in the Frasco Mountains, collecting keys as a way to cope, representing her want to escape and be free. Eventually, she finds a rare artifact, a weapon named Flamant Nagel in the shape of a key. Quick sidebar, where things get especially weird, Flamant Nagel is a living relic that tries to manipulate strong beings into giving him their power. For example, he says,
"Such undeniable fighting spirit. such hidden power. There was a time when I would have leapt upon her without hesitation.
While interacting with the character Elfelt. Now back to Abba. She decided to keep this living relic as a partner, calling him her husband and naming him Paracelsus, after the Swiss physician/alchemist. Their relationship is anything but healthy, as she clings to him as a constant source of happiness, believing that anyone who gets near them is trying to steal Paracelsus away from her. Her obsession is literally destroying him, as in her jealousy form, Paracelsus seems to be melting. She had no real experience with other humans, only learning about the world from her lover, who is biased and selfish. Only in Guilty Gear Strive do Paracelsus and Abba attempt to make the relationship healthy, as they promise to care for each other more properly, and Paracelsus even turns deep blue, her favorite color. This scene almost made me cry. I love them. I'm gonna have a heart attack. Okay, now that I'm done being a cringy nerd, we can get to comparing them. First of all, we can identify the clear differences and similarities in their backstories. The monster and Abba were abandoned by their creators, whether by choice or not, and are left to understand the world on their own. The monster was able to explore the woods and nature, while Abba was stuck on a mountain with less to experience. The monster also had positive influences. By watching the DeLaceys speak and interact allowed him to learn about human nature and actions. Abba had a negative influence, as Paracelsus originally just wanted her power, and it didn't teach her about the real world properly. Because of how they learned while alone, they grew to be very different, with one being able to fit in mentally but not physically, and the other being able to fit in physically but not mentally. Next, I'd like to go over their pattern of speech, and how they communicate. The monster speaks very properly, almost using Shakespearean wording and speech patterns. For example, he spoke to his creator, Victor, like this. "You must create a female for me with whom I can live in the interchange of those sympathies necessary for my being. This alone you can do, and I demand it of you as a right which you must not refuse to concede." Abba speaks very unusually. She rarely interacts with anyone but Paracelsus, commonly repeating words and muttering to herself while insulting others. For example, I'll play some dialogue she has with the character Testament, who I love very dearly.
"I'm talking to Paracelsus, not you."
Pardon me, it didn't look like it.
"How rude, faking civility, proudly ignorant."
So, there's a clear difference in how they speak, as the monster is very fancy in his language and he speaks more fluently, while Abba struggles. Thirdly, they both have a complicated relationship with love and dating. The monster wants a mate, as he believes it'll cure his loneliness, while Abba has a husband, though the relationship is anything but healthy. They both grew up isolated and abandoned, so they're unhealthy with how they view romantic partners. The monster sees potential mates as the solution to all of his problems, while Abba views Paracelsus as her one source of support, keeping him away from anyone who she views as a threat. Based on the monster's actions in the book, I assume that he would act a lot like Abba if Victor really did make a mate for him. So what can we gain from this? Obviously, don't abandon your potentially immortal and powerful homunculi, as they will either make you suffer or marry a living relic. Okay, but seriously, these two work as great examples of external influence for growing up. One was able to learn from humans and adapt, while the other is extremely unwell and unhealthy. Children, or man-made creatures, need a parental figure. In the first stages of life, or the sensory motor stage and pre-operational stage, children are developing basic skills. This is when they develop schemas and ideas of things. They form connections, and they develop language. If they aren't cared for or guided in this stage, there'll be many problems in them later in life. A good real-life example is Romania in the 1970s and 1980s. Romania's dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu, for the sake of economic growth, forbade abortions and taxed families with less than 5 kids. The birth rate skyrocketed, and many parents had to give away the children they were forced to have to government-run orphanages. The workers were barely qualified to take care of kids, and they were outnumbered. Child-to-caregiver ratios were often 15-1. According to my AP Psychology textbook, when the deprived children were tested later and compared with children assigned to quality foster care, they had lower intelligence scores, abnormal stress responses, and quadruple the rate of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Hey, they're just like me. It's important to take care of our young. The world is really scary right now with everything going on, so it's important to raise children who will be prepared to go into it. And with the current rise of parents neglecting their children and giving them iPads instead of parenting, we need to prioritize it more. Make sure to love the still developing people in your life, whether it's a child, sibling, nephew, cousin, or homunculus, as it can make a difference.
Yeah, I'd like to solve the puzzle.
All right, go ahead. That's it.